All right, let's get going. I am Daniel Hume, and I've been involved in AI for over 25 years. My undergraduate, PhD, postdocs are all in AI. I started a company 16 years ago that's been building AI solutions for some of the biggest companies in the world. We were acquired by WPP 3 years ago, where I take on the Chief AI Officer role, so figuring out how we apply AI to transforming media marketing communications across 120,000 people. So that's me, it's boring. So we're going to talk about how AI, a different way of thinking about AI, not through definitions or technologies, but I'm going to give you a framework to think about AI and how to apply it to your business. And I'm going to use media marketing communications as an example. So I guess over the past decade or so, I've been engaging with organizations who've been thinking about how to embrace and bring AI into their companies. And broadly, there are three areas. The first area is how can AI be used to improve core productivity? Copilot, these types of technologies are going to be embedded into our tools to allow us to create PowerPoints more quickly and things like that. The second is how can AI be applied to solve problems across our supply chains? We all have them. There are lots of frictions. And so that's what I'm going to focus on today. And the third is how can AI completely disrupt my industry or organization? If you're very lucky like we are in WPP, Mark Reed, the CEO, has said, how will AI completely disrupt this industry? And we need to do it before other people do. So when I engage with organizations, again, there are broadly three aspects of a company where you can apply AI. And as I said, we're applying AI to solving problems across supply chains. But what organizations are ultimately trying to do, either consciously or unconsciously, is creating a digital twin of themselves. A digital twin is a simulation of your entire organization. If I went to a retailer and I said, I'm going to run a marketing campaign that's going to increase demand by 10%, can you project across your supply chain, will your suppliers default on their supply? Do you have enough space in your warehouses? Do you have enough delivery drivers? Do you have enough people in the stores to fulfill that promise to the customer? Most organizations are a long way from being able to project those questions across their supply chain. So the first digital twin is your business model. The second is that liquid layer of resource, people, skills, hopes, dreams, desires that you need to allocate on top of that business model. And AI is now being used to figure out how to understand people's skills, their relationships, and allocate those people to work that align with their values and the values of the organization. And third is back office processes. We all have them: hiring, firing, onboarding, expenses. I think most of us know that they're quite bureaucratic. AI is not only making them more efficient, they're changing the way that we do back office processes and making them more effective. So I think those companies that are going to survive and thrive are the ones that create these three digital twins over the next decade and converge them. So when there's lots of definitions of AI. I think the most popular definition is the weakest, which is getting computers to do things that humans can do. So over the past few years, we've managed to get machines to recognize objects and images, to correspond in natural language. And when we get machines to behave like humans, and because humans are the most intelligent thing we know in the universe, we assume that that's intelligence. I would argue that humans are not that intelligent. That's a different conversation. There's a much better definition of AI that comes from the definition of intelligence. So instead of using human beings as the pinnacle of intelligence, it's this. It's goal-directed adaptive behavior. We all have goals, whether it's routing vehicles to maximize deliveries, or allocating marketing spend to maximize return, or allocating our workforce to maximize utilization. Behavior is how quickly we can answer that question. And we'll talk later on about how hard it is to answer some of these questions. But the key word for me in this definition is adaptive. What you want to do is build systems that make decisions, learn about whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so next time they make better decisions. And if I'm being totally honest with you, you tend not to see adaptive systems in production. Building safe adaptive systems is extremely hard. So instead of looking at AI through definitions or through technologies, I'm going to give you a different way of thinking about it. Before I do a little bit of a history lesson, this is AI in the 60s and 70s. It's Socrates. Socrates is famous for inspiring the Socratic method. If I say to you that Socrates is a man and all men are mortal, I can infer that Socrates is mortal. And AI in the 60s and 70s was writing down lots of things that we know about the world and then trying to infer new knowledge. And it didn't really scale. In the 80s and 90s, a new type of AI came along that's modeled on how brains work. This is the brain of a bumblebee. My PhD 20 years ago was trying to model the brain of a bumblebee in a machine. Bumblebees have 1 million brain cells. Their brains can fit on the end of a needle. And bumblebees do amazing things. They navigate 3D worlds. They talk to each other. They solve problems. They don't handle windows very well, but ultimately they're very smart creatures. And the question was, can you model 1 million neurons in a machine? 20 years ago, you couldn't, but we can now model billions of neurons, and we currently call these large language models. Now, large language models are amazing. They're amazing at knowing things about the world. They're amazing at telling you what they know about the world through imagery, through text, video, sound. They are not necessarily good yet at making predictions or reasoning, and they are definitely not good at making complex decisions. So the framework that I want to present to you actually has 6 different types of applications of AI. I think there are 6 applications of AI that can be applied to any friction across any supply chain in any industry. So when I'm looking for frictions, I'm trying to figure out how does that friction map to one of these or many of these applications. The first one is actually task automation. Now, task automation gets a bad rap. It's using very simple algorithms, if-then-else statements, macros, RPA, to replace repetitive, structured tasks that human beings are doing by essentially something that's very simple. The fact is, if you apply simple algorithms in the right way, you can drive a massive amount of value in your organization. You don't need to gravitate to new, shiny technologies like generative AI. The second category is content generation. We all now have the ability to generate any generic content. The battleground for organizations, though, is not creating generic content. The battleground is creating brand-specific, production-grade, differentiated content. That's a battleground. And so what I want to do is introduce you to an idea that we call brand brains. So if you look at the media marketing supply chain, if you look at this long enough, there are 4 underpinning AI services that, when combined together, solve end-to-end marketing. And this is just one service. So brand brains essentially allow you to create production-grade or almost production-grade brand-specific content. If you went to a large language model and asked it to produce an ad, let's say for Milka, it might get the color purple, but it won't really know or understand the nuances, the complexities of that brand. These images are generated using large language models that are trained, tuned on, that have a deep understanding of that brand and their guidelines. And I should just geek out a second. There are broadly 2 ways of making brains smart. The first way, so a brain, a large language model, is a little bit like an intoxicated graduate. And one way to make that intoxicated graduate smart is by giving it a book or your brand guidelines or materials, ragging it essentially, and then asking it questions, and it opens the book and it answers the questions from the book. And we all know we can build these and rag these brains in seconds or minutes. If you want to create brains that are able to create this type of content, it takes several weeks of training, of tuning, of combining different types of technologies to essentially get to a professor. The difference in intelligence is a graduate with a book all the way through to a professor. And that process is actually very, very hard. So I think large language models are amazing at not just creating content. They're amazing at recreating how people perceive content. So the third category is human representation. And so we call these audience brains. If I showed you an ad or a policy or an experience or a promotional material, then I wouldn't necessarily know what goes in your brain. I wouldn't know what goes in your mind and your body unless I asked you. And people are not very good at responding on what goes in their mind and body. For the first time ever, we can build brains that recreate or simulate how people think and feel about content. We can use those signals that we've never been able to access before to be able to now better create content, but also more accurately predict activation. These audience brains are very, very important. So like I said, this is the third category, and one of the things that we're doing with Coke is we're ingesting a huge amount of data on our data, their data, third-party data, to build a system that allows their marketing team to identify and validate the segments they know exist, to be able to surface new segments that they didn't know exist, and then be able to isolate those segments as audiences and engage with them as a focus group. I should say that one of the we're also building brains that represent every corner of society. Political parties, newspapers, cultures, minority groups, food compliance claims, ad compliance claims, because when we're creating content, we want to make sure that we're not breaking any laws or we're causing any offense. So we can actually use large language models to actually help us in making ethical and responsible content. I should also say that the power in these brains are not how they work individually, but when combined, they're amazing. So we can build a synthetic audience, and we can ask that audience, what ad would you like to see for Thanksgiving to buy this particular product? And the audience brain can tell you the image prompt that you give to the brand brain. So you can get these brains talking together, which is very powerful. The fourth category is what people called AI before generative AI. It's machine learning, it's data science. Now, I would argue that machine learning is very good at making predictions. And I would also argue that, that companies don't have insight problems, they have decision problems. The power of machine learning is not making predictions. The power of machine learning is explaining those predictions. So if I show you an ad with a black cat, I can predict the clicks and likes and sales and comments. But what machine learning can do is it can say, Daniel, if you change that from a black cat to a ginger cat, you're going to get more clicks, likes, and sales because that audience likes Garfield. That's a terrible example, but what machine learning can do is it can surface and help you understand insights about the world in ways that we haven't been able to before. So this is what we call our performance brain. And just to give you an example of how these brains work, what we're going to do is we're going to create an ad. And this ad is using three types of technology. The first type of technology is the brand brain. The brand brains are able to understand the brand of a particular product. In this case, it's a L'Oreal product. What we're going to do is we're going to choose an audience, and the audience will be an Amazon UK audience, I think we're going to choose. And what we're going to do is we're going to enrich that audience with other data sources. And in this case, we're going to pull in data from customer reviews and other data sources to try to understand how does that audience perceive content. So we can enrich that audience with more data. And now, when we click on Create, we create an almost perfect, what is called an Amazon PDP. It's an ad that you'll all have experienced if you bought anything from Amazon. We can change that from a UK audience to a Spanish audience, and that's not just a translation, that's using the L'Oreal Spanish brain to be able to understand the nuances and the complexities of that audience. We can change it from Amazon to Notino, and you can see that it creates a perfect a Notino ad, and when you see it, we change it from Notino to Instagram, we're going to bring in the performance brain. So the performance brain will tell us not just it'll tell us the number of likes and clicks and things that we're going to get from that particular ad. So this is how we can combine these different technologies to create amazing content. The fifth category is complex decision making. So now that I can use my performance brain to more accurately predict the activation of content, I now need to figure out how do I allocate that content to channels to maximize the return of my investment. And this is what is called an optimization problem. So the first two brains, the brand brains, the audience brains, are predominantly large language models. The third brain, the performance brain, is predominantly machine learning. The fourth brain, if you're old enough, it used to be called operations research. It's discrete mathematics, it's optimization. So just to give you, again, just to geek out a little bit, if I have 5 pieces of content that I need to allocate to 5 channels, there are 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. There's 120 possible ways I can allocate 5 pieces of content to 5 channels. If I have 15 pieces of content to allocate to 15 channels, there are now 1 trillion solutions. One rule to take away with you today: anything more than 7, don't use a human for. If I have 60 pieces of content to allocate to 60 channels, there are now more possible solutions than there are atoms in the universe. And so WPP have to allocate thousands of pieces of content to thousands of channels every second of every day. And that's not generative AI, it's not machine learning, it's optimization. So you've got to make sure that you're using the appropriate technologies to solving the correct frictions in your organization. The final, we call this our channel brain. The final category is human augmentation. So a few years ago, I'd be talking about how we can use exoskeletons and cybernetics to make ourselves faster, better, stronger. One of the things that we're doing with one of the biggest brands in the world, I can't tell you who, is it's going to sound really creepy, but for each one of their employees, each one of their marketing team, we create a large language model. And we train that large language model on the digital footprint of that employee, their email, their calendar, their feedback. And then we can ask that digital you, if I put you on this project, will you work well? If I put you on this team, will you thrive? Now, that might sound creepy, but it's being embraced by those employees because they feel like their digital twin, their digital representation, represents them better than 5 numbers in a HR database. These are the 6 categories, and the reason why I love them is because they also help you navigate this complex world of AI safety, security, ethics, and governance. The types of questions that you need to ask yourself when implementing task automation are very different when building digital twins of employees, where you can identify secret lovers and people who are going to leave the company before they know they're going to leave the company. So we use this framework to navigate applying the right technologies, the right approaches to solving the right frictions. Ultimately, these technologies are being built to to create a platform that we could call WPP Open, which is essentially an end-to-end platform that solves marketing, underpinned by these intelligent brains, coordinated across our platform with using the applications that we're all familiar with, as well as applications that we're building in WPP to serve end-to-end marketing. And so our biggest clients in the world that are using these technologies and using Open to make sure that they are again coordinating and solving end-to-end marketing using the different applications underpinned by data and these brains. And it's being rolled out to our biggest clients. And I think I'm out of time, and I'm now open to questions.